Hi, it's Colin Cowherd. I started The Volume to bring you some of the most authentic voices in sports. While you're here, make sure you hit subscribe. Thanks. Well, holy hell, your Dolphins. Oh my God, these allegations. So you had Wayne Huizenga, and all these billionaires have their issues. But you know what's funny, Coach? When I heard Brian Flores allegations, my takeaway was, and by the way, Hugh Jackson made the same allegations with his owner, Jimmy Haslam. And, you know, Dave, my takeaway was we always talk about there's 8 or 9 really great quarterbacks in the NFL. And I always think, well, there's only about 8 or 9 great owners in the NFL. You know, there's a lot of squirrely guys out there and squirrely families doing things. When you heard Brian Flores' accusations, did you immediately dismiss them? Or is part of you thinking, oh, yeah, I've had 3 different ownership groups. I could see it.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I mean, I thought he came across very believing. You know, I don't know Brian. I've never met him. But I guess the more I thought about it, I mean, I don't know if an owner would really know who the best quarterback in the draft is. You know, I mean, really, I mean, think about some of these guys. They don't know, only if somebody's telling them. So it'll be very interesting. I mean, it's really a sad day on both accounts. You know, the allegations, obviously, that Brian's making, but also that he's making against an owner in the NFL. I mean, in today's world, with everything going on and the betting world becoming such a big part of it, and points and you know, and to lose games, I don't know. It's a mess. It's really bothersome. And I've got a lot of friends over there, as you know. You mentioned, you know, nobody's really talking. No one's saying anything. I mean, I think there's going to be a lot more people involved in different conversations. You know, Chris Greer is the general manager. I brought Chris on board when I was the head coach here. It's a Scott for me. I think the world of Chris. His dad was a long time, one of the most respected scouts in the National Football League back in the day. And Chris, you know, and he's the general manager. So I don't know. You know, his name hasn't been mentioned on either side at this point. So there's going to be a lot more people that have information and have opinions on which way this went. It's just a shame. Now, you know what? If I get the whole thing about the hiring process, and I would be upset too. I mean, if I was going in to interview for a job and found out in any profession and found out that somebody already had the job, that would be very disappointing to me. And I would be upset about it. As far as getting released because you had 2 winning seasons, you know, I mean, I averaged 10 wins a year at Miami. So don't go. I never lost a season at all. So I can't go there. Jimmy Johnson was pushed out of Dallas after winning a Super Bowl. So, you know what I mean? So no, really. So let's not say because 2 winning seasons that you can't be fired. Any coach, anywhere. There's a lot of things that go into it. And but the whole interview process, I get that. And I would be very disappointed too if I thought that I was in there interviewing and trying to sell myself and trying to get this job, knowing that somebody else already had it and mine was just window dressing, as they say. So I get that part of what Brian's saying. I really do.
Listen, if you go to the last 5 years, there's been a handful of really good hires. Sean McDermott, Mike Vrabel, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Matt LaFleur. I'm not disputing that. But I went over the last 20 years and coach about 15% of these hires last. So there is something weird about the hiring process. I'll give you an example. So if I was the New York Giants, I hired Ben McAdoo, never been a coach, bombs. Shermer, never been a coach, bombs. Joe Judge, hell, he'd never been a coordinator, bombs. I would have thought as an owner, I'm going to go get somebody who's been a coach. And they went with a coordinator again. Forget Brian Flores for a second. The last guy that worked in New York, Tom Coughlin, like Flores, had been a head coach. I am surprised that Jim Caldwell, Doug Peterson, Jason Garrett, they're rarely getting interviewed. Are you a little surprised? I mean, Jason Garrett, 9.5 years, Dave, he had one losing season. He didn't get a sniff on any job. What do you make of that?
Well, I thought about that too. Doug Peterson, I thought would be a guy that would be the first guy off the list. Just because of, I know Doug, I know his personality. I mean, I think the players enjoyed playing for him. He gets the big picture. He was a quarterback. I mean, what are you looking for? The interesting thing, as you were naming those head coaches, I was naming their quarterbacks in my mind. Joe Burrow, Aaron Rodgers. I mean, which we all know has a lot to do with it. And these guys are all very good coaches. I'm not removing that from our conversation. I'm just saying that most of them have pretty good teams. And I think, everybody kind of falls into that, Sean McVay mode, that we can get a guy and I can have a better relationship with him, and I can make him kind of my guy as compared to a guy that's a head coach and wants to do some more things his way.
Sure.
Jason Garrett is interesting too, because I think guys used to get jobs and get interviews, at least Al Davis interviewed almost every head coach because he wanted the information from the club that the guy was with. Tell me everything about the Dallas Cowboys. How does Jerry do this? How do you so when you got an established head coach for that long a period as a Jason Garrett, I'm really surprised that he's not getting interviews just to get these other general managers and owners to get information from them, right?
Yeah. No, the whole process is screwy to me. I don't even get it. It is interesting, though, Dave, that we have 19 of 32 coaches are now offensive. It'll probably be 21 or 22 when it's all over. The last 4 coaches were offensive. Sean McDermott and Mike Vrabel are really outliers. They're really defensive young coaches that are winning games. If you were a general manager, even with your defensive background, would you think to yourself, boy, if it's a coin flip, I got to go offensive guy here?
Well, here's the only concern, I never got to that point. But when I went to the Bears, I hired Ronnie Turner, Noah's brother, who I'd worked with at USC as my offensive coordinator. And we're winning 9 games. We go to the playoffs. We win a playoff game. The next year, he gets the head job at the University of Illinois. And I made this comment when the Bears hired Matt Eberflus, because he is a defensive guy. Great, comes from the Colts, solid deal, everything. His numbers, he has done a great job with the Colts defense. But he hired Luke Getsy from Green Bay to be his offensive coordinator at the Bears, and maybe there's something to, if the team has success, everybody's going to want to hire Luke Getsy. You're the guy that got Justin Fields squared away, so now I got to go find another offensive coordinator. Where if you do hire an offensive guy, the quarterback's the top priority. He's going to get him squared away. He's going to be overseeing. I just think that the defensive coaches in this league do not get nearly the respect nowadays that maybe what they did in the past. I mean, when I got my job, there was Belichick and there was Parcells. I could go down. There was a lot more defensive mentality coaches. And that's not the way it is today. And I just think it's because these owners want to get a guy that they can have for 10 years and know that we're going to have our quarterback for 10 years. And the defense, they can figure that out later.
Well, also, there's something to think about. The league, the greatest fear Roger Goodell has as commissioner, I heard him say this, was a player dying on the field. So they're trying to make the game safer. What does that mean? Not as many tough hits. What does that mean? It's more offensive. It used to be, Dave, you maybe had one receiver on a roster who was willing to go over the middle, Michael Irvin for the Cowboys, and take shots. Hell, the middle of the field now, that's all offense. That is all offense. And so I do think the league is trying to get safer. That hurts the defense. I also think sports gambling and fantasy football, when offensive players shine, the TV ratings go up. You have greater relationships as a fan with quarterbacks, backs, receivers, because you get points. And so I think the league, as it grows, is leaning offensive, and the ratings indicate it works. So if an owner came to you and said, Dave, it's your first NFL job, Miami, I'll give you $100,000, just lose the last 3 or 4 games, what would be your reaction immediately?
My reaction would be, I would lose the locker room, and you might as well fire me, because and I kind of, my tenure, it's funny you say that, little different circumstances, but our owner, God rest him, Wayne Huizenga, we started off slow. That's the year Ricky Williams, and he wanted to start, because of some outside opinions, which Wayne never did. He wanted to make some quarterback changes and so start playing some younger players. And what ended our relationship, I said, I cannot do that. I says, I will lose the locker room. Jason Taylor, Zach Thomas, Sam Madison, no. Even though this guy is struggling right now, our quarterback, Jay Fiedler, as an example, we got to stay the course, Wayne, because I'll lose the locker room, because this is who these teams believe in. So I always go back to my players. How am I going to get my players to play hard for me? How am I going to get the most out of my players? And I think that, I think that's what Brian Flores alluded to, that I have a responsibility to you, yes, as the owner, but and that ended my job. That ended my job at the Dolphins. And basically, Mr. Huizenga said, well, he's the boss, and this is what you want to do, then it's not going to work, and it didn't work. So, it sounds like different circumstances. Obviously, it had nothing to do with winning and losing, throwing games or any of that stuff, or no money or anything. But still, where the owner wanted the head coach to do something that, and the head coach is thinking about those players. I mean, how am I going to get these guys to give everything they got every week and lay it on a line if I'm not doing that by the plays being called, or the people, who are playing, or however you were going to try to do that? I have no idea. But I get Brian Flores' point, because I kind of lived it to a different degree.
Let's talk about the Bears. Eberflus. Here's what I worry about. Never been a head coach. First-time play caller as a coordinator. First-time GM, only worked with the Kansas City Chiefs. And Justin Fields was really rocky in year 1. Boy, Dave, there's a lot of firsts there. Aren't you a little concerned?
I am, for all the reasons you said are legitimate. But maybe the best thing is if Aaron Rodgers leaves, and Minnesota is all upside down right now, right? New head coach, new general manager. So I think that will give the Bears are going to accumulate some wins, in my opinion, just because of what's going on in their division. They're going to have a chance to make some strides if Aaron Rodgers leaves, and who knows what's going to happen at Minnesota. Kirk Cousins, are they going to be starting over? We don't know. And I'll tell you, Detroit today just hired Matt Nagy. Now, you talk about oil and water. Is that the expression? Right? Matt Nagy is now the new offensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions. And you talk about a guy that, lacked running the ball. Dan Campbell, all he wants to do is run the ball. So that's going to be real interesting. I mean, that seems to be that's amazing fit right there. It truly is.
Well, Dan's old school, Matt's new school. And so It's going to be really interesting. Now, here's what I like about it, is that if Campbell doesn't work in 2 years, you have somebody with head coaching experience in the building you could elevate. Nah. You don't buy that?
No, I don't buy that. No.
Okay.
I don't buy that.
All right, you're a Pittsburgh guy. I'm going to throw this at you. Nobody currently with the Steelers, that's a playoff roster. You have exceptional receiving talent, Dante Johnson, Chase Claypool, Juju Smith-Schuster. You have a rookie tight end who looks like he could be a star. Najee Harris, I thought he was better than I suspected. The defense has led the NFL in sacks for 5 years, and Mike Tomlin is a Hall of Fame coach. You have historically a very good front office. You do not have a quarterback in that room that is good enough to win multiple playoff games. Let me throw this at you. You run the Steelers. You're from Pittsburgh. Jimmy Garoppolo, 2 years. Haskins behind him. We will draft a quarterback over the next 2 years or make a deal for one. But because of Jimmy Garoppolo's injury history, Dave, you don't have to give up much for him. In fact, if the Niners could get Joe Hayden a corner for Garoppolo and a 5th-round pick, that may be it. Because
right.
I believe Garoppolo, listen, Kyle Shanahan's record is awful without him. You can say what you want, Dave.
Right.
If you have surrounding talent, you can win a lot of games with Jimmy. I've got proof. Would you give him a role for 2 years knowing his injury history?
I would, because of the situation that Pittsburgh is in. I agree with you. Mason Rudolph and Haskins, I don't think they believe any of those guys can play. They definitely have to sign someone or draft them. Here's the biggest problem I have with that thought is the San Francisco runs the ball and they run an offense, in my opinion, that's about as quarterback friendly as anybody in the NFL, right? Pittsburgh, even with Najee Harris, the running back, who I think is a star, they really haven't committed to running the football. I know they did the last game or two, but leading into the last 4 games of the season, they were in the bottom 4 with number of attempts. So I think it could be disastrous for Jimmy Garoppolo to go to a team like Pittsburgh or anywhere where they are not going to be at least a balanced run team. At least a balanced run team. Otherwise, you're not being fair to him or you're not being fair to your team. He's got to be in a quarterback-friendly offense for a couple of years until you get somebody younger and move on down the road. That would be my opinion. Maybe not as much with Jimmy. We know what we get with Jimmy.
Yeah.
But how are we going to protect him? How are we going to give him the best chance to be successful? We got to run it's got to be a quarterback-friendly offense, just like San Francisco does. You know what I mean? And it's hard for me to even say that Pittsburgh might not be that type of team because everybody up there since I was born talked about running the ball and being physical, but it sure hasn't happened the last couple of years.
I want to talk about another team you know. So we've talked Dolphins, Bears, Steelers. Let's go to the Cowboys. Those 4 teams you have great insight on. Not that you don't otherwise, but those 4. So I have seen multiple occasions where Mike McCarthy struggles with clock management. He's an offensive guy. I understood Herm Edwards as a defensive guy for years, kind of struggling with clock management. Take me to your career. I don't remember Dave Wannstedt struggling with clock management. In the case of Mike McCarthy, I almost wonder if they should take it out of his hands. I think at one point Herm Edwards hired somebody to worry about clock management. For you, in your career,
right?
Because you were a guy that you kind of let the offense, you wanted to run the football, but you were what I would call a walk-around coach. You went from unit to unit. You coached coaches. Is clock management that difficult?
Well, we did. I'll tell you, my first year up there, because I knew the responsibility that I had. We took 1/2 a day at training camp with the entire staff. And I had my young coaches pull out every 2-minute drill, successful and non-successful, as the NFL had. And we put them on a tape. And we came out of that meeting with what are teams doing well? When did they start using their timeouts? In other words, like the Joe Montanas and Dan Marino's, the best in the business back then. I mean, Montana was the best. And they didn't even, Bill Walsh, they didn't think of calling a timeout unless there was 45 seconds or less. They would let it go. So if there was a minute, they were running plays. And so we came up with a script of this is when we want to call the timeouts. This is when we don't. And obviously, this is when we can take a knee with 1 timeout, with 2 timeouts. So it was not anybody up there or me trying to think about it. I mean, we had it documented. And yes, there are some gut decisions. I'm not saying that, depending on the score of the game. I get that. But so I always had, it was like Mike Shula was my quarterback coach, and he was my tight end coach at the Bears. He was my quarterback coach at the Dolphins. And Mike was really smart, and he was my guy. When we got down to that situation, Mike, how many plays do we got to run before we can run the clock out? Mike, coach, we're coming up on a minute. We got to get ready for the no hurry. I mean, he was always the guy, and I welcomed that. Now, I had a philosophy too that when we were not going to give the team the ball back before the half. I don't give a darn. I mean, if there was 2 minutes, I'd take a knee and before I'd take a chance of dropping back and throwing 3 incomplete passes and giving Brett Favre the ball at the 45-yard line and let them kick a field goal. I didn't. I wanted to go in with the momentum at halftime. That was just my personal philosophy.
So that's interesting. So Andy Reid, he, with 5 seconds left, see, I didn't like it, and I love Andy, runs a play. And my takeaway is this. I want the field goal. I want to go into the locker room with a 24-3 lead, and my guy's going, we got him. And I want the Bengals going into the locker room thinking,
100.
You know, Dave, I didn't like it at all. And I love Andy.
No.
What did you make of it?
100% agree with you. I mean, that was for me, in the way I would look at it, I'm with you 100%. I mean, you want to go in a big game like that. You're always trying to keep the momentum,
yes.
Particularly when you got the lead. You want to keep your foot on the pedal. How can you best keep your foot on the pedal? Get 3 more points. Create that separation even more so. No, I agree with you on that. But so I never really had a problem with clock management because I had someone who we had talked everything through. And we knew what we wanted to do from a philosophy standpoint, and they knew me. I mean, I remember Chan Gailey, and we get the ball at Miami, and there'd be 2 minutes to go, and I said, "Let's run it and go in at halftime." He'd say, "You sure you don't want to throw a pass here?" And I said, "Nope. Let's use. If they want to use their timeout, but we got the lead, or it's tied. Let's go in at halftime and regroup." I was conservative, and another reason why I'm sitting here talking to you and probably not coaching, but that's just what I believed in because trust me, it worked out in our favor a heck of a lot more than it didn't.
So Jim Harbaugh interviews for the Vikings job, doesn't get it, goes back to Michigan on signing day, by the way. Dave, you have a rare perspective, and so would Jimmy. You coach college and pro. Right now, there is more structure and control over personnel in the NFL with millionaires than there is with college due to the transfer portal. And I believe you can't have any in-season integrity with your roster. A player could leave week to week. Like in the NFL, you've got a trading deadline and a free agency period.
Yep.
I think part of Harbaugh, maybe it's a small part, I think this transfer portal is so out of control with no guardrails. I think you're going to see more college guys, my opinion, go pro. I think Harbaugh wants to get back to the NFL. I think he wanted the Vikings job.
Oh, I know. I've been corresponding. In fact, I was texting with Jim last night. I wanted to see the Bears interview him. And I said this and I got everything buddy in Chicago started up a month ago. And I said, you don't have to hire him, but I would bring Jim in and talk to him. And my big thing with Jim Harbaugh, and maybe people look at the offense he runs as a dinosaur offense, old school, but at least when Jim walks in the door, there's an identity there.
Yes.
You know what you're getting, right? So, but the Bears had no interest, and he played for Bill Polian, and Bill Polian was part of the selection committee. Okay, fine. So then the whole thing was signing day. I said this on the air Tuesday morning in Chicago on my radio show. I said, guys, Jim is going to Minnesota. It's over. And he told me that Mr. Ross, this is a month ago, because of the Michigan thing, that he was not going to do anything in Miami. He didn't feel good about that. But I said he's going to Minnesota. You know how big signing day is? And I know most of these kids are signed early, but signing day is kind of the one day where college coaches are high-fiving each other up and down the halls, bringing a They bring in big breakfast, and the recruits are calling in, and you're putting the names up on the board. This is our new depth chart. It's an exciting, and then that night you go out and all the alumni have rallies, and the head coach says, this is our final class. National Signing Day is a real exciting, important time. And for Jim not to be there, they love him. And I love Jim, but boy, I'll tell you what, a lot of places that would have been a real problem that you're up at interviewing the night before on signing date. I mean, it's different, but he's back and he's fired up. He texted me last night. He's full of enthusiasm, 90 miles an hour. So here we go. That was a strange one though. And if for NFL people, they might not be able to digest how important this college signing day is. And the other thing too, I talked to Pat Narduzzi, the head coach of Pitt. He called me about 10 days ago because he hired Frank Cignetti, an offensive coordinator who I had at Pitt. We were talking about Frank, and he says it's to the point where he has to recruit. I says, well, when can these guys not leave? And they got Addison, the little receiver who won the Blitnikoff Award.
Yeah. And
this kid is being recruited for this NIL, like this thing, and teams are trying to, talk him into leaving. And it came out today. Narduzzi said it today that last year at this time, Notre Dame was trying to get Kenny Pickett to transfer. I mean, that's not right. That's you shouldn't have to recruit these kids 3 times. One time to get them, one time to make sure that no one else steals them, and one time to keep them from going in the draft. I mean, it's tough.
Coach, just so much insights. You're the most connected man in showbiz. I love it. I ask you a question, I get an answer every time.
Yeah, I mean, it's there's some. The last few days have been very interesting days, in National Football League and college football too. I mean, but and then Michigan ended up. I gotta say this because I'm a Michigan fan. I mean, they ended up number 8 in the country in recruiting without your head coach there. I used to stand by, and my daughters laughed at me because I used this on my radio show. I used to stand by the fax machine, and they texted me, Dad, there's no more, the fax machines are no longer. But I used to stand there.
Sure.
You could send the letters in at 7:00, and I would stand by that fax machine like a 10-year-old kid at Christmas waiting for those letters to come in. That's what a big deal it was.